All right, guys. So today, man, I got a legend in the DJ industry joining me today. Someone who's built not just a brand, but a movement, bro, in the luxury, wedding, and private event space. He's the founder of the SCE Event Group, a company known for delivering next level experiences, high energy performances, and some of the most, in my opinion, jaw-dropping weddings I've ever seen in the game, man. He's rocked events for A-list celebrities. He's traveled the world DJing, and he continues to push boundaries in our industry, man. My guy, Jason Jani, bro.
I appreciate that.
Of course, brother.
That was super kind. I'm like, how are we going to start this off? I'm like, okay, Nate.
Yeah,
okay,
man, I appreciate that, bro.
Nice,
I appreciate you. Man, first off, bro, before we start, I just got to say, Jason, like, between you, Joe Bunn, Brian B., right? You guys were, so when I first started wedding DJing, I was almost embarrassed to tell people that I was like a wedding DJ, right? Because it had like this stigma that like, it just wasn't cool. But you guys come on the scene, bro, and make it like super cool. You know what I'm saying? So I got to just say, man, thank you for everything you've done in our industry and you continue to do.
I appreciate that.
So everything, man. So I'm honored to sit down with you, bro.
Yeah, I'm you know, for someone that has now known you for a little bit and to see your journey, your company, the DNA, you know, thing just starting to fly. It's been really cool to watch.
Thanks,
you kind
man.
of like come out and continue to grow and continue to sail and continue to fly. I think I've sent over a number of messages to you like, bro, I'm proud of you. Like,
Thank you, bro.
That was so dope. It was so good. And, you know, now we're sharing a lot of love today. So
yeah, no doubt. Exactly.
We got to start off with positivity.
Right,
Always
bro.
positive.
Yeah, man. That's why I tell people all the time, man, like, you got to give people their flowers while they can smell them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, all too often things happen, you know, life is so short and you're like, dang, I wish I would have told this person that. And you don't get the opportunity, you know?
You know, it's funny you say that. I feel like being here in Las Vegas at this just event, it brings up a lot of memories for me because I've spent a lot of time working in a different conference, but what had become part of this now conference. And I feel like, you know, relationships that I've built and, you know, some people have continue to be and some people are no longer. And, you know, it's crazy that you brought that up because I feel like it's something that hits home with me specifically today. And even to take it a step further, you know, when you had talked a little bit about just coming up with the framework of weddings and being embarrassed to say, you know, I feel like, you know, from a background perspective, I never wanted to be a wedding DJ. I never like set out and been like, I want to be a wedding DJ. I want to have a mobile company. Like that was never in the cards for me. But I think I realized at a point in time when my friend circle and my extended friend circle started to get married and we would go to these events and how I would leave and be like, oh, like coming from like a DJ background and like, you know, experiencing private events and, you know, understanding the taboos and the stereotypes that always have been applied to our industry. I feel like I've always worked to hopefully show people that attend events that entertainers can be talented, that DJs can be cool. It can be, you know, it can have style, can just have a vibe that's different. So I appreciate you saying that because it's been kind of like my life. I feel like for a long time at this point.
No doubt. So, bro, you said a lot there, and like I feel like there's so much that I'm so excited to jump in with this conversation because, you know, I still do binge watch your YouTube videos, bro, and all the tips that you've given away for free, you know? But let's just backtrack before all that. Tell me about Jason Jani, like before this Jason Jani, right? How did you get your start? Like, I'm sure you've probably told the story before, but I've never heard it. So I want to hear the story of Jason Jani.
So I didn't, you know, come up in high school as like a DJ that like, you know, carried my dad's records or any of that kind of stuff. Like for me, the journey started later, actually, at the end of like my high school life, to be candid with you. And if I look back at my life, I think of twists and turns for my journey have all kind of had their own purpose, which led me to like where I am today. So, you know, to bring it all together, I really got infatuated with, I guess, the nightlife world. And when I was in high school, I was very athletic. I spent a lot of time, you know, working out and training. And that was originally going to be like my path. I was going to go to college and hopefully do sports and be kind of dialed into fitness and all that stuff. And when the cards didn't maybe land the way that they were originally maybe intended or thought to land, I almost didn't know how to process it. I was at this point in my life where I feel like I dedicated a good amount of my high school life and maybe beyond into something that didn't really happen the way that it was originally intended. Right. So I was kind of devastated. And after, that kind of closed out, a lot of my friends were going out and experiencing the teen clubs and all these like things that were at the time. And I remember I went to a teen club and I walked in and I was fascinated by the fact that there was one person in the middle of that club in the DJ booth. And he essentially controlled a room of 1,500 people. And in that group of people, there was boys and girls. And it was just like a vibe that I never even knew existed. And I think that was like a point in my life where I was like, wow, like that looks really cool.
How old were you? Would you say?
I was probably 18 or 19. Okay. And at that point, I was probably 19 at that point. And at that point, I started 18, sorry. I was probably 18 at that point. From that point, I kind of did what I had to do to get my way to Canal Street to buy a set of 1200s and a beat up Gemini mixer. And I would buy records, whatever I could afford, which was not very much. And I was really into I think of music at that time was very more like progressive, trancy, housey stuff. And, I got really into it. And, I started going out a lot more because I was fascinated by this industry, and I started to make friends with people that were involved in the industry. Okay. Friends with a DJ, friends with this. And I'm like, man, how do you do this? And he's like, why don't you come by my studio and I can show you how to do it. So someone kind of lending out for me helped kind of get me to that next little step in the journey. And those little steps ended up being big steps over time. And, I was, when I do something, I don't do anything half-assed. So I'm spending all this time learning how to blend, mix. You got to think of culture, right? Like you would blend a song for a minute. Perfect. Yeah, and it was like, you don't do that anymore. Mixing, it was just like a thing. It was like a vibe, and started to work out a little bit, and things kind of evolved. Now, there was a lot that kind of happened, and industry kind of changed. My circles kind of changed. Eventually got to a point where I was walking away from DJing because I was like, I don't want to be involved in this. There's some things going on that maybe didn't line up with just my beliefs and people that I wanted to be around. And a person who ended up becoming a very good friend of mine, kind of took me under his wing and was like, all right, it was actually an owner of a club that basically put me on with someone. He paired us and he's like, you guys are going to work together. And I'm like, all right, I don't really know how this is going to work. Long story short, playing some music. We ended up being this little duo. Okay. We took this small little club bar spot, turned it into a big vibe. Then we took that party and took it to other places. Oh, nice. And then it became a thing where I was working out, 5 or 6 nights a week. Sure. And we would work out everywhere. At that time, I was putting myself through college, graduated school, still stayed myself in the club space, did a lot of radio work. And then as time went on, I loved it. I mean, I was getting into everything at that point. Music started to change, evolve, hip hop, records, this, that, everything. Then I got to a point where I was doing private events and not really weddings per se, but as my extended friend circle started to get married and I'd go to weddings as a guest, I realized how there was such a big variance between what we experienced in the nightlife world and what my friends all enjoyed to what was actually being delivered at weddings. And I felt like there was a void. And I feel like I had a great group of people around me that all loved to have a good time, but we were not a conga line, electric slide, slide group. It wasn't, you didn't have to be that. The friends that are still my friends to this day are amazing. You good time. Everyone loves to party and dance and just have a good time. And long story short, we by way of, hey, my friend's getting married, my sister's getting married. Would you consider doing it? Yeah. SCE kind of started by accident because I never really set out to be a wedding DJ. I never wanted to do it because I never wanted to have the stereotype that you shared. Right, exactly. Kind of twisted into my space. I was I was not that. I was
tuxedo.
I was this. I'm not that. Right. And long story short, I thought that if I could start working on this and I could at least do events where people prioritized entertainment, where people prioritized the talent associated with being a good DJ, it could be something. Right. I would do one event, and going back to like that time, I had these like, bootleg business cards, and I would print out like 500 cards, and I would do a wedding and give out 100 cards.
Damn.
And, it was like crazy because I'm like, I don't even really know what I'm doing, but I'm like, I'm trying to do everything I can. I had done mobile work for different people that didn't really like fit my vibe. I ended up learning a little bit, but I kind of just left it. So I had a good idea of like structure, events, formalities, but I really was dialed into the music. I wanted to focus on the music, the experience. So I kind of like went round and round with this thing, and I started doing events, started giving out a lot of cards, and I quickly realized like I couldn't compete with these businesses that had infrastructure. And I was like a guy with maybe friends helping me out, but I just believed in the path. And I'm like, okay, well, how can I like level with these guys? How do I do this? Like, if I want to do this at scale, or I want to do this more than like the one-off situation, I need to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
My background is in business. My background is in engineering. So I started thinking through things. I'm like, all right, well, I don't have the means to invest in crazy this or crazy that. I can't have a flash website that, these companies had like $20,000 websites. And here I am like putting my stuff together with like animated graphics. I'm like, what am I doing? And long story short, I got the idea driving home from work one day. If I stopped at Best Buy, I could grab a camcorder. I could put it behind me at one of these weddings that I was doing, and I can show people
what you do,
what I actually can do. And if you go back into like the 2008, 2009 timeframe, there wasn't a lot of people that were doing things like that and putting it on the internet. As a matter of fact, that was like a taboo in our industry. And when I first started sharing my videos of my weddings, which still exist to this day on the platform called YouTube.
We're going to have to link them.
We'll put them in here. These events like shifted the landscape for me. All of a sudden I started realizing like, hey, I could tell this person that's calling me asking, they heard about me from someone that was a guest at a wedding, but I don't have like even pretty pictures to put on a website, but I can give them a link to this new platform I called YouTube, and they could actually see what I was doing. So I would do these like unedited 45-minute like rage. I mean, like lighting, this, that, and me just playing a wedding like a club. And I would put these videos up, and people were like, you can't do that. You're giving away your secrets. I'm like, what secrets am I giving away? Like, I'm playing like I would play at a spot. Like, the playlist is never the same.
Right.
But I realized like the playlist was always the same for so many people. So I'm like, well, I'm not approaching things this way. This doesn't always go to this, that goes to this, that goes to that.
Right.
But I realized like how limited people were into like the craft, right? So like, I'm like, well, my superpower is I know how to mix, I know how to play. It doesn't have to be this, it could be this. And I'm playing parties around these people that I'm working for, sharing the stories on this platform called YouTube. And it was like essentially putting gasoline on a fire, which blew things up, So like for me, fast forward, this is like 2008, 2009. Fast forward, we're here in 2025, and I'm still putting content on YouTube because I feel like the creative platform and the art of sharing and putting things out there is the way to help others. But also like, there's no other way to share your story other than sharing your story, right? Like, I never wanted to be a DJ that was the greatest thing that never was. I always wanted to be a DJ that like, I have the pictures to back up the claims or the thing. I have the videos to back up the claim. But at the same time, like, I've spent so much time working on the craft, and I always wanted to be different. I never wanted to be what everyone else was. If everyone's doing white, I want to be black. If everyone's doing black, I want to be white, or I want to be pink. I never want to be what everybody. Now, the journey has taken a lot of twists and turns along the way. I never meant to have people, but by way of good fortune, and I think putting things out there, there was relationships I had with people that did private events, that worked in the nightlife world, that started to come into my space. And I found myself turning away more than I could actually do at one point, know? And, I started having conversations with people like Tony and even Jeff and some of the guys that are still with me to this day at SCE. And they'd be like, man, I saw your video. I love what you're doing. If you ever need help, I'd love to. And I'm like on the other side of the phone, like, wow, like, you want to work with me? Like, I'm like the kid, you're like the G. I'm like, who am I, And long story short, that's how SCE kind of came together, because it was like, I'm passing things, or at first I wasn't even passing things to homies. I was like, I'm not available. I'm sorry. Click. What I mean? I can't help you. Like, I don't know what to do. Then I had like the guy who supported me, who no longer is in the industry, doing events. I trained him. We were like two teams kind of going out, and I'm like, we're making waves. I'm doing more than we can actually do. Yeah. And then all these people started coming into my space like, hey, if you ever need help, I'm like, I might need some help.
I'll be honest.
How can we do something here? Like, I'm like, why do you want to work with me? I love what you're doing. Like, I work at this company, and I'm not given the opportunity to do what I want to do. I want to play what you're playing, but I have to play within this framework. And I'm like, I don't like that, So I'm like I'm like learning along the way. Long story short, it's been a blessing ever since, and to this day, we work really hard at trying to curate experiences that connect with the uniqueness of every couple, but also like embrace the talent and the artistry of what we do as creators, right? And navigating the complex, situations certain families deal with, and the emotionally charged madness of private events and weddings specifically. And
I mean, it's a fine line to walk, bro. Like, and I feel like, you have done a great job of like bringing that nightlife energy into the wedding scene, because like you said, like a lot before that, man, like I remember when I first started DJing weddings, it was like, you played the Cupid Shuffle and it's just like, bro, like it's the same crap over and every weekend. But then when you can play the stuff that you like to play too, and you resonate with the right people, it makes it so much better.
I'm not saying like Earth, Wind & Fire September is not a banger but like most 27-year-olds, it's not on their like top 10 song must plays. But like going back, that was always like, talking about like timing and stuff, like think of cultures, right? Like going back to like when I started, like Run Around Sue was like a staple, I mean, looking at that song now at this time, that's decades ago, right? But like, it wasn't too far off from like the beginning, you know? So you're looking at people that are in their 20s, like, yeah, everybody likes a good vibe and a good bop and a good throwback and brings them back to childhood and parents and all that stuff. But like, that's not what it takes.
Yes.
So like my people wanted to go and hear like the anthems that you were hearing out and about that are on literally on the radio, that are being played in the clubs. And club life was very different, going back to that time. So it's a lot to unpack with all this, but
no, bro,
I feel like into a lot of it.
I feel like you've done a great job too, like staying ahead of the curve. You know what I'm saying? Like you already talked about, first off, approaching weddings a different way musically, right? Yep. But also like you were one of the first guys that I saw with like the video booth, right? Like the TV booths, Cold Sparks, CO2, right? How do you constantly stay ahead of the curve? Like, are you like looking at certain things? Like, how are you seeing stuff in the clubs and be like, yo, I'm going to bring that to the wedding? And like, how are you doing that?
I think at different times within my journey or different parts of my life, I feel like the stories and the way I've captured or harnessed inspiration has been different, right? Mm-hmm. Like I've always dreamt of playing in Las Vegas, started playing out here quite a bit, doing parties and all different stuff. And I would come here for inspiration. But I'm not looking at it like, oh, what are they doing at Omnia? Because a $10 million chandelier that comes out of the ceiling with all these like things on it, that's not reality for people. Right. But like walking through the Cosmo and looking how they light a chandelier in a lobby can give you ideas of how you can maybe incorporate colors or different solutions in a different way to like some of the things that we were doing. For DJ booths specifically, you talked about like, the furniture stuff, like Jeff and myself, we went down the rabbit hole probably sometime in like the 2010, 2011 timeframe where we wanted to elevate the look, the presentation. Going back to my childhood, one of the things that I learned from my father was, you always have to have like clean sneakers on. You always have to, how you present yourself is how people will receive you. Yeah. So I've always been like very sensitive to like how you look. Are you relevant? And that's why I've never been about the matching tie cummerbund sets that a lot of DJs have gone through over time. But the booth is something that's a staple part of that event. So we started going down the rabbit hole of how could we change the look. Everyone at that time was using facades. I feel like I was one of the first people to jump on using a facade at events and putting it out there. But I'm like, what's next? Like, where can we go from here? You have a white facade, you have a black facade. So we would spend a lot of time in Vegas. And I remember I went to a club and I'm looking at the DJ booth with Jeff and we're like, yo, this would be incredible if we can get something like that and bring it to someone's wedding. We went down a rabbit hole. We ended up sourcing our first round of boots from Horrorboard in Germany.
Okay, yeah.
Made a great relationship with the team over there. We're the first people to import that product line to the US. We had bought a bunch of different things from them and started bringing it out to the events. And that's where it started. Over time, I've never been one to
now,
sit
was it
on
the podium Horrorboard, or what was the?
It started with the Stereo T.
Okay.
And it started with the Classic, which is like a nice clean. We can insert a picture of this too, so you can kind of get a look at what that was. Now, those to some people are like still so fresh and new.
Yeah.
But that to me is like what we did in 2010,
and
over the years, I mean, I've built and designed my own booths. I've contracted carpenters and drawn things out. And been like, I would like walk into a venue and I'd see like a piece of molding and be like, I would love to have something that could match that vibe. So like if I'm ever here, I have something that no one else has. And I've always been someone that has chased to be the first, or chased to bring something to the table that would not be easily duplicatable in some way, shape, or form outside of like just my DJing, way that I've played. And honestly, I've gone through, the evolution of working with Toad and his booths, to building our own booths, to coming back to Toad and helping him with just conversations of how to, hey, maybe there was an issue with this, and he's gone off and fucking changed things around, totally retuned it. We've built booths. I still to this day, I think I offer my couples 10 different options of what we can use based on the venue, based on their vision, based on whatever. But for me, I think inspiration comes from always being a student of the craft, never being comfortable to say hey, I'm good. Right. I have done a video recently on my YouTube about that. People are like, why do you still do, what are you doing? And I'm like, man, if I stop, why would I stop? I'm still enjoying the process, and we go through this whole thing. And I think, I've interviewed a lot of DJs. I've become tight with a lot of DJs who have, in my opinion, influenced culture at a very grand scale. And it doesn't matter if I'm talking about Jazzy Jeff or someone like Chris Cox or local guys, I'm like, what's your tip to anyone coming up? Right. Always stay a student of the craft. And it's honestly something that to me resonates so much with my life, because, good is good for then. Right. But that's not going to be relevant. The way you played 3 years ago is not going to necessarily work as much today, because culture changes, people change, the industry changes. So you always got to be on the lookout for new different technologies, new different, services, just things that, can shift the landscape or the atmosphere in a way that connects to your goals and your brand and your vision and how you do things and all that stuff. So I know I'm talking.
You're dropping gems, bro. And so, you said something there, goals, man. So because I feel like, and it's funny because one of my homies met you for the first time earlier, Chris and them from Cali. And they were just so amazed, bro, by the fact that you took the time to really pour into them. At the end, that's what it is, pouring into guys who maybe they're feeling a little, uneasy, or they're feeling like their confidence isn't quite there yet, or where they want to be. They're yearning to get better. Right. So what is something that, besides, of course, being a student of the craft, but if you could tell the next guy that's up and coming right now, hey man, if you could focus on this one or two things, what would those things be for Jason Jani that have, brought you to where you're at now?
I think that's a great question. And to me, to be honest with you, there's a lot of ways that I could answer that, right? Because I feel like as you do this thing called events, and as you become an owner of a company, if that's your goals, as you start growing your company, things change, right? For me, I think the biggest things that have shifted the framework or changed the narrative come down to taking a chance. But also, I think it's not just believing it. It's actually understanding how to convey the story. And that was my advice to the guys in California. They're like, hey, I'm stuck at this thing. And I'm like, man, tell me a little bit more about you. And listening to them talk. And I'm like, I think you have it, I feel like DJs as a whole, and I feel like I speak to DJs that are at a one-on-one level, they're just getting started, but I feel like I've also talked to people that have made millions and millions of dollars, and that's reality, and I've talked to people that, I feel like my network is pretty interesting in a lot of different ways, but I feel like we as private event DJs, and I think if I just talk to like the world of people that work in private events, a lot of times like we limit our ability and or potential based on what others have done in our immediate area. Mm-hmm. We put our own ceilings. Everything is a glass ceiling, and I feel like DJs do a great job of almost like self-sabotaging their potential. They actually limit themselves from doing things because they don't want to take a chance on releasing a piece of content that's authentic to them to share what they do. Right. They don't want to, expose themselves or to take that risk. Whereas, like, I feel like that's the game changer, right? Bro, so like, if I could boil my life down to the biggest gains I've ever made in this life or in this industry, I should say, were by learning how to storytell and really like embracing the unique authenticness of like myself,
who you are,
my journey, like what I want to do. And I think over time, and as that's become refined, I've learned how to say no. I've learned how to balance things. I've learned how to put things into perspective, and I've learned how to be good to others. And I feel like that's management quality, right? But like for a DJ that's just starting out, it's like overwhelming. There's so many things to do. There's like, oh, this controller came out, this new speaker came out, like work on the craft. And then work on your superpowers. Like what makes you unique? What makes you the perfect solution for someone? I talk to the guys, talking about, they're here and they're there. I'm like, embrace that. Why would you want to do this if it doesn't make sense for you? Like you have to take the steps to make it happen because no one else is going to see it and put you there until you put yourself there.
Facts.
So I feel like to me, it's like the content is the thing that I always say. If I go back to the beginning, anything that's really like brought things to the table for me, my relationship with Joe and Brian started because I was releasing content. And people were talking to Joe will tell the story 10 times over. He's like, people are like, man, who is this Jani guy? Like, you got to meet this guy. And he's like, who? And then one day we're at a dinner here in Las Vegas, and he's like across the table from me. He's like, bro, people are like telling me about you. Right. And I'm like, who are you? I'm like, oh, you're Joe Bunn. Like, oh, cool. You know what I mean? Like, and we became friends. You know what I mean? Like just by a conversation, and to me, I feel like there's so many lessons that you can give to someone, especially after you've gone through like different, don't grow too quick. Make sure you take your time with this and that. But I think like the initial phases of like going from like that first step on the ladder to that second step, that's all about like owning who you are, understanding who you are, what you're capable of, and how you can essentially like share the things that are you. Right. I feel like everyone in this industry, like at SCE specifically, we have a lot of different talent options. I never wanted to replicate what I do with the team. I wanted everyone to have their own unique voice, their own unique superpowers to make them the perfect solution
like the Avengers, for somebody.
Bro. Literally wanted someone to be like, this is your guy. Right. You're like that. He's your guy.
You don't got a team full of Hulks or it's a
everybody's
whole conglomerate of
you
people.
Want this? We've got a solution for you. And I always want to be the solution to the problem, not the problem. You know what I mean? Exactly. So I feel like there's a lot in that, but it's.
No, I mean, you said something that I feel like I preach all the time and that's being good to others. I feel like, especially in this industry, it's super easy to, gatekeep or feel that like, nah, I can't share this because, my competition is going to steal my ideas or anything like that. But, the more that I've made it an effort to just like share stuff with people without like an ulterior motive, I've realized it's been coming back to me 10 times, bro. Like, for me to be sitting down with you right here in Vegas, I feel like because I've made the effort to like be cool with people and be nice to people, it's just kind of put me in positions to like, sit right here with you,
I appreciate it all. I feel like people in life, they align with people that they respect and get along with. And, people do business with who they like.
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, people do hire people that maybe they shouldn't hire, and people, but like more often than not, I feel like the relationships you have are everything in this business. I talked to someone on the ride here today who's a comic. He's like, I do Uber during the day. I've got my own room here in Las Vegas, and I'm struggling to pull together. I left my full-time job. I'm a comic. I'm like, tell me how you're doing with it. And he's like, man, it's tough. I do multiple personalities, all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, it sounds great, you know? And he's like, there's not many people that do what I do. And I'm like, fantastic. And I'm like, what's holding you back from getting to where you want to be? He's like, man, I always thought talent was the driver. He's like, but I learned over the past year, it's really like your relationships. Yeah. Your net worth is your network, right? And that's number one. He's like, talent is actually like number 3. Yeah. And I'm like, what's number 2? And he's like, it's your look, it's your presence, it's how you react, right? And I'm like, interesting. But that's a life lesson from someone that I don't know, I'll never meet again. Right. And he's going through it in a different industry.
But it still applies.
But it applies to our world like hand in hand. Yeah. You know, it's crazy. But I feel like I've had a lot of that out here this week. Yeah. It's been a lot of like.
And you were telling me earlier, like you almost thought about not coming.
I did. I was literally pulling into the airport. I text my wife. I'm like, Dave, I think I'm just gonna come home. She's like, no. You just go.
She made the right decision.
She made the right decision. I came out here, you know, it's funny. Like sometimes people like, they'll come up and they're like, man, I respect what you do and you've helped me so much. And I'm like, that's what puts fuel in my tank. You know, like I get my fulfillment from helping others.
Fills your cup.
I feel like when I came up, no one shared information. Yeah. Everyone kept everything close. And, you know, I look at it as like, you learn by failing. You learn by costing, you know, spending money that you didn't need to spend, by investing time in areas that didn't pan out. And you learn the hard way. Yeah. You know, like I've learned to share content to help others because I feel like as a whole, if I can help people, whether it's one DJ or 200 DJs, avoid some mistakes, save time, save money, save energy that doesn't need to be either invested or spent, and avoid a sidestep of an issue that maybe like I learned the hard way. Like I did my thing to help someone else maybe grow a little bit. Yeah. And I've always believed that like all ships rise with the tide, right? So like we all grow when everyone benefits. So I've always been, you know, I've always given away a lot of information and lessons and things to help others, not just self-serving, like from a fulfillment perspective, but because I feel like if I don't do it, like who's going to be the next person to do it, you know? And I've really enjoyed your, you know, kind of like journey sharing content and seeing what you guys have going on. And I've kind of like seen it from the beginning, and I've seen it, and now seeing it like actually like built, like really building, you know? I feel like it's quite inspiring for me because I'm like, man, that's what I'm talking about. That's like the beautiful thing about this world. But it all goes back to the relationships. You know what I mean? Like, sure. Man, I'm like, we tried to to last summer. Yeah, I'm like, we'll sit down in the
military bowling championships of Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'm all about it. And
at the Budweiser table.
Yeah, people are like walking in and like, what's going on in here? You know, but this is what it takes to do it. And I'm honored to do it with you, man. I'm pumped to do it. It's like, it's a big deal, you know? I'm like, man, I want to help you. I want to help your people. Like if I can share something that can either motivate someone or just, you know, kind of give someone a little bit of a juice to kind of get over that.
Bro, I feel like you definitely have like given some real like, you know, inspirational stuff, dude. And it really, you know, like I said, if it takes the guys like you guys who kind of paved the way for the rest of us, you didn't have to take the time to do this, right? Like I'm sure you got a super busy schedule. So that's why like I really appreciate like, you know, like you, Joe, Brian, like y'all pour so much into this industry when I know, like I've had conversations with Joe and he's like, bro, like, we didn't make no money on this, but your time, the time away from your family, your kids, like people don't see those types of things from the background. You know what I'm saying?
It's funny, like coming out here and having a couple different conversations with different people, you know, and people are like, okay, so like, this is what I'm working on now. This is like my goal. And, you know, my first reaction sometimes is like, be careful what you're asking for. Like, be careful what you're wishing for, because like, you know, everyone sees the result, but they don't understand like, you know, the mountain that you have to climb to get to the top of that mountain. Exactly. You know, and I feel like for me, like I've learned it the hard way, you know, and I've gone through stuff in my life that, you know, has always been challenging, you know, and I've had to overcome things, and from, you know, losing friendships and, you know, finding people that weren't loyal to the company or, you know, had other things kind of like going on, and, you know, the unfortunate parts of like being involved in the industry, to also like, you know, like just dealing with life and balance and family and missing things growing. That's, when I first saw, I have to say this because when I first saw Nate, I'm like, man, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, but before I talk about that, I'm so happy to see that you shared a video on a roller coaster with your child on vacation. I'm like, that to me is like, that's impressionable. Like I connected to that content and I'm like, man, I'm proud. To Matt, same thing. I lots of respect for Matt. I'm like, that dude's an alien. He's so talented. And I love when he posts like him and his sons.
Kids,
like, you know what I mean? Yeah. I love the story.
Because we're real people at the end of the day. Like I feel like sometimes it gets lost and like people see you on YouTube and they see you, and you said this earlier too, like they have this preconceived notion of who Jason Jani is, but you're a whole person behind that, bro. That's completely different from like what people see online.
I'm like, I don't know what I posted that like live off that vibe. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm like, right. I try to be like kind and I try to like, I might say some colorful stuff from time to time and I might do some stuff, but like, there's like real people behind the image or that post or that one moment that, like over time, I know there's been sometimes I've shared some stuff I probably shouldn't have shared, but like out of frustration, but that's like the reality of being a real true person,
right.
Right. I've always learned to deal with things directly, right? Like I've always tried to like lead with kindness and empathy and I take time to listen, right? Like, I think that's like a superpower of mine, but I also like am a person.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like I've invested a lot of my energy into things and time. I don't even talk about money, but more time than anything, and when someone takes something and they reuse it as theirs, I'm like, I'm not mad that, like, I understand why, but like, why are you trying to be something that you didn't do? Right. Like, if you do your own, like, you're going to connect to the people. You're only doing yourself and your people, like your client base at the service.
Exactly.
Like use something that you did to show off what you're capable of doing.
Exactly.
Not something that you didn't do. That's not
Don't go copy and paste from my website or whatever the case may be and throw it on yours like it's your own.
That's the hard stuff. So I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, you're actually like kind of cool. Like, you're nice. I'm like, damn, bro. Like,
as long as you're not stealing from me.
I'm like, damn, no, sorry, bro. I don't know,
No, man, but crazy. Bro, I appreciate your time, man. Anything that you want to leave the people with?
Man, I just... If I'm going to leave the people with anything, is you follow and support this man and DNA, all things DNA. I feel like you guys are on it for real.
Thanks, man.
And you're doing it, and it's a pleasure to see you do it. If people want to support,
go support this man.
Uncle Jason.
If you don't know who Jason is,
you come on over. You're welcome to kind of jump on board. And I try to share a lot of stuff, quick tip videos, long event videos, everything in between, based on like real lessons that I've learned. And I do things.
And that's what I appreciate about that, like your content, but it's just real. Like it's just you in front of the camera, either sharing a tip, venting about something that happened, but it's real. Like, it's not like no fluff.
Yeah.
You get straight to the point. Like sometimes I hate watching videos and they're so long and I'm like, okay, bro, get to the point already. Like give it to me in the cliff notes. And that's what you're really good at, bro.
That's the evolution of doing this. I feel like I started doing it during the pandemic, like putting videos out because I needed something to occupy my mind. I need to like work through, and going back to the beginning, you learn from sharing, you gain from sharing. So I'm like, man, I got to do something just to like focus on. And a lot of people are coming to me for answers. And I'm like, I don't know if I have the answers, but I can give you my thoughts of like where I think we're at right now. So I started putting out these videos and they were really, really long. And then I'm like, all right, I got to tighten up the editing a little bit. And then I'm like, now I'm just like problem, solution. And once in a while we'll go on a little bit, but if there's anything I can do for you or your community, I mean, just reach out. Let me know how I can help. I've got nothing to leave the people with other than, I appreciate the opportunity of everybody checking this out and support my boy over here. I appreciate it. It's like this whole military bowling championship league. There's a vibe out here.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, hey guys, appreciate y'all watching. Until next time, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. This is Jason Jani. Damn it, let's get out of here.